Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So, whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. Today, we're tackling the paradox of why we enjoy sad music. We all have those songs, the ones that make us cry, yet we play it on repeat. But why does sad music feel so good? Why do some of us actively seek out music that evokes sadness rather than avoiding it like we do in everyday life? And why does something that's supposed to make us feel down actually bring us comfort, connection, and sometimes even joy? Well, today we're going deep into the psychology, philosophy, and science behind this strange relationship we have with sad music. We'll explore what makes a song sound sad, why our brains interpret it the way they do, and what it actually does to our emotions. So, let's dive into it. First off, let's talk about what actually defines a sad song. It's not just a feeling, though that is a big part of it. Researchers have tried to pin down the musical formula for sadness, and it turns out there are some pretty consistent patterns. Essentially, we're talking about a combination of objective musical properties and subjective listener interpretation. Objectively, it's about the acoustic features. Think slower tempos, minor keys, lower overall pitch, darker timbres, and softer dynamics. These elements contribute to the melancholic atmosphere of a song. Studies on music cognition suggest that these musical characteristics trigger physiological and psychological responses associated with sadness. These are slower heart rate, increased emotional engagement, and even chills. For example, music in a minor key is often perceived as sad because of its harmonic instability compared to major keys, which tend to feel more resolved and uplifting. Meanwhile, slower tempos mimic the way that we physically react to sadness. Our speech slows down, our movements become less energetic, and our breathing patterns shift. Instruments also play a role. A solo piano playing in a lower register can feel more intimate and sorrowful compared to a bright, high-energy orchestra. And string instruments like the violin or cello have a particularly strong association with sadness due to their expressive, human-like tone. However, sadness in music isn't just about structure, it's about how we perceive and interpret it. Some studies show that what we hear as sad isn't just about the notes and chords, but also about the personal emotions that we project onto the music. Lyrics, for example, can amplify sadness significantly. Songs about heartbreak, regret, nostalgia, or longing tap into these universal emotional experiences. But they also function on a deeply individual level. What might be a sad song for one person could be a comforting or even cathartic experience for another. This is because music triggers memories, associations, and past experiences that shape our emotional response. A great example of this is Adele's Someone Like You. Why does it resonate so deeply? Well, it's not just the minor key or the slow, haunting piano. It's the lyrical theme of lost love, the way her voice breaks on certain notes, just the overall rawness of the delivery. Her vocal phrasing mimics natural speech, slightly delayed notes, subtle shifts in volume, and the emotional strain in her voice. You can really hear the sadness. The way she moves from soft vulnerability in the verses to soaring pain in the chorus, it mirrors this emotional arc of grief. And this is where the subjective aspect of musical sadness becomes most evident. If you've been through a painful breakup, Someone Like You might bring those emotions flooding back. But if you haven't, you might still feel the song's sadness, but in a more distant, aesthetic way, appreciating the beauty of the sadness rather than personally relating to it. Another classic example is Yesterday by the Beatles. It's not just the melancholic melody or the soft, stripped-down instrumentation. It's the lyrical theme of longing for a past that can never be reclaimed. The song expresses a deep sense of regret and nostalgia, emotions that many listeners can relate to. Paul McCartney's vocal delivery adds to the sadness. His voice carries this wistful, almost resigned tone as he's reflecting on something beautiful that's slipped away forever. I feel like the simplicity of the acoustic guitar just makes the song feel even more intimate, almost like a personal confession. And if you've ever looked back on a time in your life with longing, Yesterday might stir up those emotions, making it feel deeply personal. But then again, if you haven't had that experience, you might still feel the song's sadness, but in a more detached way once again, appreciating the beauty of its sorrow rather than personally relating. So ultimately, what makes a song sad is a combination of both its structural features and our emotional engagement with it. It's this balance between musical form and personal experience that makes sad music so powerful. So now let's get into the real paradox of sadness. Sadness is universally recognized as one of the basic 6 human emotions, and in everyday life, it's often something we seek to avoid. It's a response to loss, grief, or negative experiences overall, and it comes with a range of emotional and physical effects. But here's the paradox. When it comes to art, especially music, sadness seems to have a unique appeal. Surprisingly, many of us enjoy it. But why? How is it that we can find pleasure in something that, in real life, we typically try to escape? The ancient Greeks were the first to grapple with the paradox of finding pleasure in sadness within art. They developed tragedy as a form of theatre, allowing audiences to experience intense emotions, particularly sorrow, within a controlled environment. Aristotle suggested that this experience of sadness in theatre was a process of catharsis, an emotional purging. Audiences could confront negative emotions, feel them deeply, and then leave the experience feeling emotionally cleansed. This idea of catharsis, of confronting and processing difficult emotions in a safe space, continues to resonate with us today when we engage with art, especially music. The fact that humans seek out sadness in art despite its unpleasantness in real life is known as the tragedy paradox. Early thinkers like Aristotle recognized that engaging with negative emotions through art provides a unique reward. But that leads us to our next question. Why specifically sadness in music? Well, music, more than any other art form, has this incredible ability to tap into our deepest emotions. It can speak to our fears, our desires, even our pain. But unlike the real-life sadness we try to escape, the sadness in music offers something different. It gives us an experience of beauty, meaning, and connection. To understand this, we need to look at the different schools of thought surrounding how music impacts our emotions. Enter the philosophical perspective. First, we have the cognitivists. They argue that music doesn't evoke genuine emotions, but rather it triggers memories or reflections of past emotional experiences. Then we have the emotivists, who believe that music can generate real emotions. For them, when we listen to sad music, we're not merely reflecting on past emotions, we're experiencing real sadness. However, they also believe that the sadness that we feel in response to music is different from the sadness that we feel in real life. It lacks the same emotional context and urgency that comes from real-life events. Instead of the deep existential sadness that might accompany the loss of a loved one, music-induced sadness is more of a bittersweet, reflective experience. On top of that, philosopher Gerald Levinson identified several psychological rewards that explain why we're drawn to sad music, despite its negative emotional content. One of the most well-known is catharsis, but sad music also allows us to apprehend and savor emotions, helping us engage deeply with feelings that we might otherwise suppress. Sad music also fosters emotional communion, creating a sense of connection, and offers emotional resolution, helping us process feelings. It also provides the pleasure of expressive potency, the ability to deeply engage with music and understanding feeling, using music to reflect on our emotions. All of these rewards make sadness in music strangely enjoyable. Another interesting theory comes from the work of researcher John Sloboda, who explored how people respond emotionally to music. According to Sloboda, the pleasure we derive from sad music may be tied to the way that music taps into our cognitive and emotional processing systems. He suggested that sad music can evoke a sense of tension and resolution, which we find pleasurable. This tension-resolution dynamic mirrors the way that we respond to storytelling, where the build-up of emotional or narrative tension leads to a satisfying resolution. So just as we feel relief or fulfillment when a book or film reaches its emotional climax, music can guide us through a similar journey. In this way, sad music provides a structured emotional experience, allowing us to engage with deep feelings in a safe and controlled way. In addition to these emotional and psychological benefits, sad music also taps into our memory and imagination. For many listeners, sad songs trigger specific memories or personal associations, creating a poignant connection between the music and their own life experiences. This connection allows listeners to revisit past emotions in a way that feels safe and even therapeutic. Listening to a sad song may offer us an opportunity to process unresolved feelings or to relive moments of nostalgia, even if those memories are tinged with sadness. And what's interesting is when we listen to sad music, we often find ourselves enjoying emotions that are inherently painful. Studies have shown that listeners often report feeling a sense of joy or emotional satisfaction after listening to sad music, even though the music itself may evoke sorrow. This paradox of enjoying something that should, in theory, make us feel worse is one of the central mysteries of sad music. A key thread running through the theories about why we enjoy sad music is that it often provides a kind of emotional release or catharsis. For some listeners, the enjoyment that comes from listening to sad music comes from the cathartic release of emotions. It's important to remember that this catharsis isn't simply about venting. It's also about finding meaning within those emotions, which the aesthetic context of music can facilitate. But the disagreement remains. Do we actually feel sad when listening to sad music, or is it something else at play? When directly asked the question, the responses vary. In one study, roughly 25% of participants said that they experienced genuine sadness, and the rest reported that they experienced some other, albeit related emotion, most often nostalgia. However, self-reports made in the context of emotional experience may provide inaccurate results, since the difference between emotional perception and emotional experience may not be clear or equal to everyone. In studies in which the researchers made a clear distinction between perceived and felt emotions, participants reported experiencing mixed emotions. This highlights the complex interplay between the music's emotional context and the listener's personal interpretation. There's so many elements that can significantly influence how we perceive and experience sad music, like personality, cultural background, and past experiences. I'm going to get into some of these a little bit later on in the episode. But one of the most intriguing aspects of sad music is how it seems to help us process our own negative emotions. It's well established that sad music can offer solace, particularly during times of personal distress. It allows listeners to express, identify, and understand their emotions, which in turn aids in processing the pain. This form of emotional processing can lead to a sense of consolation, as the music becomes a tool for coping. It's almost as though the music validates our feelings, helping us feel understood by external sources. The music acts as a mirror, reflecting our own emotional state and providing a sense of validation that can be deeply therapeutic. I touched on this in our second episode on music and romantic relationships, specifically in relation to heartbreak anthems. These are such a good example of songs that we listen to in times of grief that just make us feel heard and understood. It's why they're so popular. In relation to this, sad music often fosters a unique kind of emotional communion. This idea that I briefly mentioned before as one of Gerald Levinson's psychological rewards is defined as a sense of connecting with the composer or other listeners through a shared emotional experience. And it deepens the cathartic experience. By listening to sad music, we may feel as though we're not alone in our sadness. the music becomes a bridge to others' emotions, creating this collective emotional landscape where we can share our feelings even without words. This sense of shared emotion can be deeply comforting, providing us with a sense of belonging and empathy. This sense of connection amplifies the cathartic process, making it easier to reflect, process, and eventually find resolution. This connection can also be seen as a form of social surrogacy, where the music provides a sense of social presence and emotional support, even in those moments of solitude. In many ways, the act of listening to sad music acts as a form of reflective emotional release, similar to how people might turn to other forms of emotional expression to help work through complex feelings. Sad music can provide not only emotional catharsis, but also a sense of emotional resolution, helping listeners come to terms with their feelings. And in some cases, it even facilitates acceptance coping, a process by which individuals move towards a healthier psychological adjustment after a difficult event. This process is often facilitated by the music's ability to trigger autobiographical memories, which can aid in processing past experiences and facilitating that emotional closure. For people who listen to sad music as an adaptive way to cope, some evidence indicates that this may be a healthy strategy more applicable for psychologically healthy people, rather than those who are depressed or anxious. Interestingly, the role of sad music in coping and emotional processing is often tied to the listener's psychological state. For people who are psychologically healthy, the act of listening to sad music can serve as an adaptive coping strategy. It offers emotional validation, comfort, and the opportunity to reflect on personal experiences in a safe and controlled way. However, the same benefit may not be true for individuals struggling with deeper emotional difficulties, such as those dealing with anxiety or depression. In fact, some research suggests that for individuals experiencing these conditions, sad music might actually reinforce negative emotions or even prolong emotional distress, potentially leading to rumination or overthinking rather than resolution. But for the majority of people who engage with sad music as a way to process feelings or find comfort, it seems to function as a healthy emotional outlet. The process can even be deeply rewarding, offering the listener a chance to savor their emotional experiences, gain a better understanding of their feelings, and strengthen their connection with the emotional worlds of others. This understanding can lead to increased emotional intelligence and resilience, allowing people to navigate future emotional challenges with greater ease. So, what does all this mean for our understanding of the relationship between music and emotion? Well, perhaps the key lies in the way that music allows us to experience complex emotions in a controlled, safe environment. We can savor the beauty of sadness, experience emotional catharsis, and feel a sense of connection to others, all while remaining emotionally intact. In this way, sad music offers a kind of emotional playground, a space where we can engage with our feelings without the consequences of real-life sadness. It's a space where sadness isn't something to fear or avoid, but something to explore, understand, and ultimately enjoy. Now, before we move forward, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode so far, it would mean so much if you could rate the podcast or leave a quick review wherever you're listening. It really makes a difference in helping the Sound Mind reach more like-minded listeners just like you. Thank you so much for your support, and now on with the episode. So, we know why we might enjoy it, but how does sad music work? What are the mechanisms behind this paradox? Well, one of them is explained by Jocelyn's Breck-Weber model. This model explains how music triggers emotions through 8 different mechanisms, which I went through in our first episode on why we love music. But 2 of the relevant components here are contagion and aesthetic judgment. So, contagion refers to our ability to pick up on the emotions of the music, whilst aesthetic judgment refers to our ability to judge the objective beauty of a piece of music. These mechanisms can work together, leading to mixed emotional experiences. For example, a sad song might make us feel sorrow through emotional contagion, but simultaneously, we might appreciate its beauty, leading to positive feelings. This complex interplay of emotions is key to understanding why sad music can be so powerful. And that leads us to the emotional ambivalence of sad music. Research shows that people often experience a mix of emotions when listening to it. We might feel sadness, joy, nostalgia, or even transcendence. This emotional complexity suggests that the experience of sad music is rich and multifaceted. But let's explore what's actually going on in the brain when we listen to sad music and why it might be so enjoyable. It's a fascinating combination of brain chemistry and neural networks at work. Research into how our brains process sad music shows that several different brain systems work together to create the emotional experience. When we listen to sad music, the first thing our brain does is assess its emotional tone. It evaluates elements like harmony, melody, timbre, and even volume. This assessment primarily takes place in the brainstem, which handles basic sensory processing, and in the primary and secondary auditory cortices, which are responsible for processing sounds. These areas determine whether the music sounds sad or uplifting, and this initial emotional assessment is crucial to the next stage of processing. Once the music has been assessed, our brain starts to connect the sound with emotional memories and past experiences. This is where the hippocampus, amygdala, and the parahippocampal gyrus come into play. These regions are involved in memory and emotion processing, helping to evoke past feelings that are linked to the music. For instance, if you hear a song that reminds you of a breakup or a loss, your brain may activate these regions to bring up the emotions associated with that memory. But the experience of sadness is more than just recalling memories. It also involves changes in how our body feels emotionally. For example, we may notice a shift in our heart rate or a feeling of heaviness, which are both processed in regions of the brain that control bodily responses to emotions. This makes the experience of listening to sad music not just an intellectual or emotional event, but a physical one as well. In addition to these emotional and memory-based processes, there's another layer: how we judge the music itself, coming back to that aesthetic judgment mechanism. Our brains also make aesthetic judgments about the music's emotional impact, such as whether it's beautiful or deeply moving. And this process happens in higher level brain areas, particularly in the frontal cortices. These areas help us determine how much emotional value we assign to the music and, crucially, whether we find it pleasurable at all. In many cases, finding something beautiful or moving leads to feelings of pleasure. So, while sad music can evoke negative emotions, it can also trigger pleasurable responses, especially when the music stirs up emotional arousal. Emotional arousal refers to the intensity of the emotions we feel, whether that's deep sorrow or an intense joy. Research shows that this increased emotional activity is often associated with pleasurable feelings. It's like the heightened emotional state we experience can create a sense of satisfaction, almost as if we're processing complex emotions in a way that feels rewarding. Another aspect of pleasurable feelings from sad music comes back to the triggering of memories. These memories are a key part of the emotional response that we feel when listening to music. In fact, the brain regions that process memory, like the hippocampus, are also linked to the brain's reward system. When music evokes a strong memory, whether it's a joyful or bittersweet one, it can activate areas of the brain associated with pleasure and reward. These brain regions are crucial to how we experience pleasure from various stimuli, including music. This process helps explain why some of us might find a deep sense of satisfaction or pleasure when we listen to sad music, even though it's primarily associated with negative emotions. It's not just the sadness itself that draws us in, but also the complexity of emotions that come with it. There's an emotional and physical reaction to the music, a rewarding feeling from the emotional release, and sometimes even a sense of nostalgia or catharsis that can make the experience deeply enjoyable. It's a complex mix of emotional responses, memory processing, and reward pathways in the brain. These factors combine to create an experience that can be emotionally fulfilling and even pleasurable for many people, as it triggers comfort, nostalgia, and emotional release, all without the actual pain of real-life sorrow. But while sad music can evoke these emotional rewards for some, it's not universally pleasurable. Some people love sad music and actively seek it out, while others find it to be overwhelming or even distressing. Whether or not someone enjoys sad music can be influenced by various factors, ranging from personality traits to mood to the surrounding social context or even the stage of life. One of the biggest predictors of whether someone enjoys sad music is their personality. Several key personality traits have been linked to a preference for sad music. For example, studies have shown that people with higher levels of absorption, which refers to the ability to become deeply engrossed in an experience, tend to enjoy sad music more. This trait, measured by the Telegen Absorption Scale, allows individuals to immerse themselves emotionally in what they're listening to, making the experience of sad music more intense and potentially more rewarding. Another key factor is empathy. People who score high on measures like the Interpersonal Reactivity Index, particularly in areas like fantasy and empathetic concern, are more likely to enjoy sad music. These individuals are naturally more in tune with the emotions of others, so they may experience sad music as a kind of shared emotional journey, one that is deeply moving rather than just melancholic. And beyond empathy, openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality traits, is another major predictor. People who score high in openness tend to be more curious, imaginative, and emotionally receptive, making them more likely to appreciate the emotional complexity of sad music. On the flip side, highly extroverted people who thrive on high energy and social interaction may not be as drawn to sad music, preferring upbeat and lively sounds instead. But not all personality traits linked to sad music are positive. Some studies suggest that trait rumination, or the tendency to dwell on negative thoughts, is also associated with a preference for sad music. For these individuals, sad music might not just be a source of comfort, it could be a way to stay immersed in sadness, sometimes in a way that is less healthy. In some cases, listening to sad music might reinforce negative emotions rather than relieving them. But of course, it's not just about personality. The situation we're in when we listen to sad music also has a huge influence on how we experience it. Think about it. When do you find yourself turning to sad songs? If you're like most people, it's probably during moments of solitude or emotional reflection. Similarly, listeners in a reflective or introspective mood might gravitate towards sad music as a way of exploring their own emotions or finding a sense of connection with the artist's feelings. Research shows that people are more likely to listen to sad music when they're alone or feeling emotionally vulnerable. Sad music can feel like a companion in those moments, providing comfort and validation. Some people also find that they enjoy sad music more at certain times of the day, like late at night when they're winding down and reflecting on their thoughts and emotions. Additionally, researchers also found that people may enjoy sad music more when they're mentally fatigued or distracted, and this really shows the influence of our state of mind. Interestingly, one study showed that when listeners were exposed to sad music after listening to happy music, their enjoyment of the sad music increased. This might suggest that the emotional contrast enhances the pleasure that we get from sad music, providing a sense of relief after an emotional build-up. But the social context also matters. When we listen to sad music alone, we tend to have a much stronger emotional reaction, which has even been measured through physiological responses like skin conductance. But when we listen to the same music in a group setting, the emotional impact is often less intense. It seems that when we're alone, we allow ourselves to fully connect with the music's sadness, whereas the presence of others might act as a kind of buffer. Now, one thing I find interesting is the role of culture. Culture also plays a significant role in shaping our relationship with sad music. In some cultures, melancholic music is deeply embedded in traditions and social rituals, making it more accepted, even celebrated. For example, in Japan, the concept of mono no iware, which is the bittersweet beauty of impermanence, aligns with the appreciation of sorrowful music. Similarly, in Portuguese fado or Middle Eastern makam, melancholic melodies are seen as deeply expressive rather than purely sad. They're passed down through generations and are highly valued. In contrast, Western pop culture often emphasizes happiness and positivity, which may explain why some listeners are less inclined to embrace sad music. Ultimately, our cultural background really influences whether we see sad music as cathartic and meaningful or simply depressing. In recent years, platforms like TikTok have played a pivotal role in reshaping how we interact with music, particularly sad or melancholic tracks. So while Western pop culture often emphasizes positivity, TikTok has become a space where sadness in music is not only embraced but glorified. The platform's viral nature has enabled certain songs to achieve widespread popularity, often in the context of emotional storytelling, self-reflection, or even just as an aesthetic. TikTok's algorithm, which thrives on emotional engagement and highly relatable content, frequently promotes sad music paired with videos that depict moments of heartbreak, loss, or introspection. This shift is particularly noticeable in the way that sad music is used as a backdrop for these personal narratives. For instance, songs like Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo or What Was I Made For by Billie Eilish have gone viral because they tap into the emotional rawness that the platform encourages. The music provides a way for individuals to express complex feelings in a condensed, highly relatable format, giving rise to a new form of digital catharsis. TikTok has become a space where the emotional weight of sad music is often romanticized. The platform's quick looping format allows listeners to replay a melancholic track repeatedly, enhancing its emotional impact. This kind of repetitive listening can amplify feelings of sadness, allowing users to fully immerse themselves in the music's emotional landscape. As a result, TikTok has helped to shift the perception of sad music, not as something purely sorrowful or depressive, but as a cathartic tool for emotional expression and even self-healing. The idea of crying it out while listening to a heart-wrenching song is now an almost ritualistic experience for some users, blurring the lines between entertainment and emotional exploration. The platform has made it easier for listeners to engage with sad music in a way that feels less stigmatized, creating a space where feelings of sadness are validated, shared, and even celebrated. Another big question in the field is, does our mood determine the kind of music that we choose? And the answer is kind of complicated. Some people naturally gravitate towards mood-congruent music, meaning that when they're feeling sad, they actually want to listen to sad music. This is especially true for people who score high in empathy. For them, sad music might feel like an emotional mirror, validating their feelings and providing comfort through shared experience. However, there's also individuals who prefer to avoid dwelling on their negative emotions and choose mood-incongruent music. For example, someone who is sad might opt for an upbeat pop song to lift their spirits, rather than listening to something that mirrors their sadness. This tendency is linked to higher perspective taking and emotional resilience, which helps people manage their feelings in more adaptive ways. This distinction between mood-congruent and mood-incongruent music underscores that our responses to sad music are not just about the music itself, but also about how we relate to our emotions and how we regulate them. For some, sad music is a form of therapy, and for others, it's something to avoid when they're feeling low. So, of course, not everyone enjoys sad music. While some people find solace in it, others find it overwhelming or even distressing. Just as not all forms of art or entertainment appeal to everyone, the emotional experience of music is highly personal. People's emotional reactions to sad music can range from comfort and catharsis to acute grief and emotional discomfort. For some individuals, the intense sadness evoked by music can be overwhelming. This is particularly true for those who are already vulnerable due to mental health issues, such as depression. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode, But it's been found that people with depression may be more likely to engage with sad music, but their emotional responses can be more complex. While some depressed individuals find solace in sad music, using it as a way to validate their feelings and process their emotions, others may find that it inflates their negative mood. In fact, some studies have found that individuals who are in a depressed state, or those who tend to ruminate or get stuck in a cycle of thoughts, are more likely to experience a worsening of their mood after listening to sad music, rather than the emotional relief or catharsis that others might experience. The effects of sad music are particularly relevant for adolescents, as they're at the stage of emotional development where they're more sensitive to external stimuli. Research shows that adolescents tend to gravitate towards mood-congruent music, especially when they're feeling down or isolated. Remember being a teenager and throwing on that emotional song after arguing with your parents? I think we've all been there. But while some teens report that sad music helps them process their feelings and provides comfort, others may find that it deepens their sense of sadness, especially if they're already in an emotionally distressing environment. For some teens, this can be a healthy coping mechanism, a way to make sense of their emotions and feel understood. But for others, particularly those dealing with stressful life situations, sad music can actually make things worse. Studies suggest that around 17% of adolescents report that sad music worsens their mood when they're already feeling down. These adolescents may be experiencing heightened emotional sensitivities or in a context that amplifies their negative mood, such as bullying or perhaps strained family relationships. So, while sad music can be a source of comfort for many, it's important to be mindful of how we engage with it, especially for those who are already in emotionally vulnerable states. At the end of the day, whether we love sad music or avoid it comes down to a mix of personality, mood, culture, and the context in which we listen. Some of us find beauty and comfort in melancholic melodies, while others feel that they drag us down. What's clear is that our relationship with sad music is deeply personal and shaped by a variety of musical, psychological, and situational factors. So, the next time you find yourself hitting play on a sad song, ask yourself, why am I drawn to this right now? Maybe it's to process emotions, find comfort, or even just experience the beauty of a melancholic melody. Whatever the reason, our love or avoidance of sad music is just one more fascinating example of how music connects with the human mind. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. That's all for this week's episode. If you've enjoyed or learnt something today, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it with someone who loves music just as much as you do or might just find it interesting. Do follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And come and say hi on Instagram or Threads at The Sound Mind Talks. We actually just hit 10K on Threads, which is absolutely amazing. So come and join our little community. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.